Okay, so these notes on Lamentations, they're pretty fascinating. We're going to kind of deep dive into like the heart of a city and mourning,
Hmm.
and use these poems to understand loss and resilience and all that.
Yeah, these notes are interesting because they don't just like stay on the surface.
Right.
They really get into the language and the metaphors, the historical context. It really adds layers to how we understand the book.
Yeah, it's like a behind-the-scenes look at how this whole powerful message was put together.
Exactly.
We know Lamentations is about the grief over the destruction of Jerusalem, right,
Yeah.
by the Babylonians.
Hmm.
But what makes these notes so insightful? What do they bring to the table?
Well, they point out these literary techniques that make the grief so real, like you feel it.
Yeah.
Jerusalem isn't just a city, it's like a character.
Okay.
A widowed princess mourning her people and her glory, and we see that right away from the start.
Yeah. Lamentations 1.1. How deserted lies the city, once so full of people. How like a widow is she, who once was great among the nations. It's not just a city grieving, it's a queen who's lost everything.
Exactly. And this personification thing, it's not unique to Lamentations. Like ancient Rome, the she-wolf,
Oh,
or even modern cities like the Big Apple.
yeah.
Giving a city human qualities, it makes us connect with what happens to it on a like deeper level.
Yeah, you feel it more personally.
Right.
The notes also talk about the Hebrew word eka, right, which means like alas,
Right.
and it seems to kind of set the tone for the whole book.
It's more than just saying I'm sad.
Okay.
Eka links it back to those old funeral laments. Like it's a word that's part of a ritual. It makes us feel like we're witnessing an actual death,
Not just a military defeat.
not just a military defeat.
So the author's using eka to say, hey, this is like losing someone you love.
Yeah, exactly. And the notes talk about betrayal being a big part of that grief.
Right.
Lamentations 1.2. All her friends have betrayed her. They have become her enemies.
Mm-hmm.
And that betrayal, it's happening on different levels.
Okay.
We're talking about political alliances that failed. Yeah. But it's also deeper than that. Like, it's about God abandoning them.
It's interesting how they use lovers as a metaphor for that.
Right. Like the broken alliances, even like the false gods.
Yeah.
It's about trust that's broken, a sense of like violation.
And then the author takes it even further with these really vivid, almost brutal images of suffering.
Yeah.
The notes mention some pretty intense stuff like menstrual flow, a baby's tongue stuck to the roof of its mouth from thirst, even like cannibalism out of desperation.
Right.
It's not just like an abstract idea of suffering. It's like in your face. What was the author trying to do with that, you think?
I think they wanted to really make the audience see the horror of what happened.
Yeah.
By like forcing us to picture those scenes. The text is saying, look, this is what happens. You can't ignore it.
No, it definitely makes you feel the weight of the situation.
Yeah.
But, in the middle of all that darkness, the notes point out that there's still hope.
Oh, absolutely.
Lamentations 3.22, it says, because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail.
Right. And it's not just like a little bit of optimism.
Okay.
It's about a deep belief that even when things are terrible, God's love is still there.
So maybe there's a way forward, even from all this suffering.
Yeah, exactly. And these moments of hope, they're key to understanding what the book is really saying. It's not just about feeling sad. It's about holding on to the possibility that things can get better.
Right. And then there's this whole call to repentance.
Right.
Like Lamentations 3.40 says, let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord. It's like the author's saying, hey, this destruction, it wasn't just random. It happened because we strayed from the path.
Exactly. It's a key shift in the book. It's not just crying over Jerusalem. It's about looking inward and saying, okay, what was our part in this?
So it's less about the past and more about moving forward.
Right.
Like getting back on track with God.
Yeah, finding that right relationship again. And that sets the stage for one of the most interesting parts of the book.
Which is?
The cup of judgment. This idea that judgment will pass to other nations.
Oh, yeah. That's clear in Lamentations 4.21. Rejoice and be glad, daughter Edom, you who live in the land of Uz. But to you also the cup will be passed. You will drink and drain it dry.
Right.
So what's that all about?
It's introducing the concept of divine justice. The idea that sin has consequences, and those consequences, they'll affect everyone
It's
eventually.
like nobody gets away with anything forever.
Exactly. And it adds another layer to the message of Lamentations. It's not just about Jerusalem, it's about understanding what happens when we make bad choices, individually and as a whole society.
Really, that's like warning from history.
Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing how much we've uncovered, and we just started.
Right. We're just scratching the surface here.
It's clear that Lamentations is, like, way more than just sad poems.
Oh, yeah.
It's about human emotion, loss, accountability, and faith.
It really is. And there's so much more to explore.
Well, let's get back to it. We've got a lot more to cover.
You know, one thing that really jumps out at me in these notes is how Lamentations uses different voices to make the emotion hit harder.
Oh, interesting.
Like we have the narrator describing everything almost like, a reporter.
Right.
And then there's Jerusalem herself. Her voice, it's so personal, so full of anguish.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Like in Lamentations 2.01 on it says, "My eyes are worn out from weeping, my stomach is in knots. My heart is poured out on the ground because of the destruction of the daughter of my people." It's just raw grief.
Yeah, and it's not random, that image of her heart being poured out.
Oh, what do you mean?
It's emphasizing that grief isn't just in your head, it's physical too.
Yeah, like you feel it in your body.
Exactly. Emotional pain, it can be as real as a physical wound.
Totally. And her grief, it's not just for herself, is it?
No, not at all.
Like in Lamentations 2.2, she says, "They faint like the wounded in the streets of the city. Their life is poured out on their mother's laps."
Ugh, that image of dying children in their mother's arms is just heartbreaking.
It
It
is.
shows you the utter helplessness, the despair that was everywhere in Jerusalem.
It makes you wonder how you even begin to heal from something like that, you know?
Yeah.
As a whole city.
Right, and that's where the idea of repentance comes in.
Okay.
Lamentations 3.42, "We have transgressed and rebelled, you have not forgiven." This is a big turning point.
How so?
It's not just about feeling bad about what happened, it's about admitting, hey, we messed up, we played a part in this.
So it's a shift from just expressing pain to actually looking inward.
Exactly. And that self-reflection, it's so important for the whole message of repentance and renewal.
So by recognizing their mistakes, they open up the possibility of forgiveness, of starting over.
Yeah. It's not about getting stuck in guilt, it's about using that knowledge to move forward.
There's another image that stuck with me. Lamentations 3.12. "He bent his bow and set me as the target for his arrows." What's going on with that metaphor?
It's a powerful way to show how vulnerable Jerusalem was. Like, God is the archer, and the city's the target.
It does paint a pretty intense picture of their relationship with God at that point.
It does.
You know, makes you wonder where the love and compassion are.
It's important to remember this is part of a lament. It's raw emotion, confusion. The speaker is trying to make sense of their faith while going through all this suffering.
So it's not meant to be like a judgment on God's character.
Right. It's more about how the speaker is feeling in that moment, overwhelmed by pain.
Makes sense. The notes also talk about this contrast between Jerusalem's suffering and the fact that their enemies seem to be doing just fine.
Yeah, especially in chapters 4 and 5. Lamentations 4.21 is like a slap in the face. "Rejoice and be glad, daughter Edom, you who live in the land of Uz. But to you also the cup will be passed. You will drink and drain it dry."
Right, so the speaker's pointing out this apparent unfairness.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, hey, how come the good guys are suffering while the bad guys get to party?
It's a very human response, right? To question why things are so messed up.
Absolutely. But by pointing out this contrast, Lamentations is also introducing the idea that, in the end, justice will prevail.
Okay, so the cup of judgment passing to Edom, that suggests nobody gets off scot-free.
Right.
It's about having faith, even when things look bleak.
Exactly. And that's what Lamentations is all about, that struggle, that journey from despair to hope. And it continues in the last chapter, right, where the focus shifts to the future.
Yeah, chapter 5, it feels different. It's more about asking for things to be made right.
Exactly. It's not about just accepting things. It's about actively seeking God's help. Lamentations 5.21. "Restore us to yourself, Lord, that we may return. Renew our days as of old."
That idea of return, it seems really important.
It is. It brings together the whole message of repentance and renewal. They're saying, look, we messed up, but we want to come back to you, make things new again.
So it's not just about going back to how things were, but about a real change, a new beginning.
Exactly. Renew our days as of old. It's about a deeper connection with God, a promise to live differently, so this kind of destruction never happens again.
It's a powerful message of hope and resilience. But what I find really interesting is how the structure of the book itself adds to this message.
Oh, absolutely.
The notes point out that Lamentations is actually 5 poems, each with its own style and focus.
And that structure, it's intentional, even down to how the lines of each poem are arranged.
Like how?
Chapters 1, 2, and 4, they're acrostics. Each verse starts with the next letter of the Hebrew alphabet.
That seems like a lot of work while you're expressing such deep grief.
It is, but it shows how deliberate their mourning was. Like, imagine the focus it took to write these poems, to shape this raw emotion into this structured form.
So the acrostic, it's like a way to contain the grief, to give it order.
Yeah, it creates a sense of completeness, like nothing is left unsaid. And by going through the alphabet like that, they're also working through their grief, carefully examining each part of their loss.
In chapter 3, it's different, right?
Yeah, it breaks the pattern.
The notes say it's a triple acrostic, so each line of every verse starts with the same Hebrew letter.
Exactly. And that intensification, it's like a spotlight on chapter 3. It goes deeper into the personal pain of someone wrestling with God's judgment.
So it's like saying, my pain is so big, it needs this bigger, more intense form of expression.
Exactly. And within that intense lament, the speaker asks those really hard questions about faith. Like, why did God let this happen? How can I believe in his love when things are so bad?
And do they find any answers?
They find a way forward. They confess their sin, ask for mercy, and hold on to hope. And this is where their journey, the individual's journey, mirrors the city's journey.
How so?
Both are dealing with loss, trying to understand, and choosing to trust God, even when it's hard.
It's like a reminder that even when we're going through our own personal struggles, there's still a way towards healing. But we're almost at the end of our deep dive. And I'm curious, what are your final thoughts on Lamentations? What do you think it's trying to say to us today?
You know, Lamentations, it's not just an old text. It's about what it means to be human, to experience grief and loss.
Yeah, totally.
It reminds us that suffering, whether it's personal or like as a whole community, it's something everyone goes through. But what makes Lamentations so powerful is that it doesn't just dwell on the sadness.
Right.
It gives us a way to like work through that pain, to find meaning and hope, even when things are really dark.
And that feels so relevant today, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's like every day we hear about conflicts, disasters, people going through tough times.
Yeah.
And Lamentations, it's almost like a guidebook for how to process all of that.
It encourages us to, really face our pain, to admit when we've made mistakes, and in the end, to choose faith over despair.
It's not about pretending everything's fine. It's about wrestling with those doubts and saying, okay, I still believe there's a way forward.
Exactly. And that way forward, it often involves repentance, turning away from things that are harmful and turning back to God.
So it's about recognizing that we need forgiveness and like actively trying to rebuild that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
So even though Lamentations starts in this place of deep sorrow, it actually ends with hope, with this belief that things can be made new through God's grace.
And that's what's so beautiful about this book. It takes us through the depths of human suffering, but it doesn't leave us there.
It's like it offers a way out, a light in the darkness.
Exactly.
This has been an amazing deep dive.
It really has.
We've explored this text that's both like heartbreaking and full of hope at the same time. And honestly, I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to discover in Lamentations. Every time you read it, you see new things, new connections to your own life.
You've given us a whole new way to look at not just this ancient text, but our own struggles too. When we think about what happened to Jerusalem, we can ask ourselves, how do these themes of grief, repentance, and renewal, how do they show up in our lives? How can we learn from the people of Jerusalem to deal with loss and displacement? And how can we, like them, find a way to heal and hope, even when things seem impossible?
Lamentations, it's a timeless message about resilience and the power of faith. It encourages us to face our pain, ask for forgiveness, and believe that God's love and mercy can make all things new.
This deep dive has been a truly profound exploration of this ancient text that still speaks to us today. You know what? I really encourage you to go read Lamentations for yourself. You might be surprised by how much it connects with your own experiences. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep searching for those hidden gems of wisdom that are out there, just waiting to be discovered.